What's up, guys, and welcome back to Job Site Conditions right here on Deco-Crete TV. My name's Jeff, and on today's episode, we're going to be showing you guys how to transform an 80-year-old concrete floor into a functional living space. Now, this is going to be a step-by-step video with all the tools and equipment that you're going to need, so stay tuned because you're going to learn all about it. So today's project is going to rate as a 4 on our DIY meter, and the main products we're going to be using is 100 epoxy and rock hard urethane, both from Deco-Crete. Now there's really a ton of tools that might come in handy on an epoxy job, but at bare minimum, we're going to need a drill and a mixing paddle, a few paint sticks, a few different application squeegees, some roller covers and frames, a paintbrush, some spike shoes, and a box of gloves. Now we'll cover all the equipment and moisture testing once we get out to the job site, and don't worry, these tools and products are all linked right down in the description below. So before we get started doing any of the prep work for this project, I just wanted to take a minute and go over all the equipment that we're gonna need. So one of the first things is obviously gonna be this grinder. You know, it's just really important that this is really what makes this epoxy system work, is being able to grind the floor. Again, we're removing paint, we're opening up the pores, all the stuff we need to do to make that epoxy function. Now, this guy over here, our vacuum, again, another thing that's just so crucial to these jobs is actually having a high-end dust vac that's made for doing what we're doing. We're also, even though we have this guy down here and this is making things go really fast for us, we are gonna need some sort of a hand grinder for a few different reasons. I like this one here from Makita because it has a variable speed dial on it, so I can, turn it up to a normal, 4-inch angle grinder, or I can slow it down if I need to. Now, the other thing that I'm gonna need this hand grinder for is to actually chase the cracks. There is a few cracks in this floor, and we're gonna need to open those up so we can get our quick fix in there, and we're gonna need some sort of a crack chase wheel just like this one to do that. One last thing we need to address though, again, it's just so important for any of these non-breathable coatings that we don't trap any moisture in the floor. And so always we're gonna have this moisture meter with us so we can test our slab. We've already tested this one, everything's good to go, but again, just make sure that you bring this with you so you can do that test right away. So as you can see, this room is already well underway. The walls are painted, the ceiling's finished off, so we're gonna get to grinding and see what the concrete looks like. Now, again, being that there's paint on the floor, normally always try these coating strippers out because this is a great way to remove paint or coatings. But as a second test, we went ahead and tried to go with some arrow segments here. And so these are 16 grit arrows. And the cool thing about these arrows is when you're removing paint like this, is it all tends to hang back in this little arrow part here instead of just staying up there on the surface of your diamond, and it just doesn't glaze things over as bad. Now, if this were a newer floor, we'd still be using this grinder, but we wouldn't be trying to remove any paint. So what we'd be trying to do in that case is get rid of that really slick trowel layer. So now that we're done with all the main grinding, we just got to address this edge right here. And you guys can see that big grinder, it gets close, but we still have that little bit left to go. And obviously we got to get rid of that paint in this situation, but even on a normal floor where there wasn't any paint, you still need to get rid of that paste layer, all the way up to the wall as close as you can get it. So all we need to do is hit these edges and we're ready to go. Well, we pretty much got everything prepped, and all our quick fix is all ground down. Everything is completely good to go for prep at this point. Now, before we actually apply any epoxy, we're just gonna need to make sure we completely, thoroughly clean this floor and just give it that one final clean. We always give it a final step, whether that might be an acetone wipe down or maybe that's some sort of a dust mop. But if we don't thoroughly extract all the dust as much as we can with that vacuum first, all we're gonna end up doing is just pushing it around. So I just wanna run over the application tools real quick here as far as what we're gonna actually need to apply this stuff before we get on to mixing. And one of the first things, just as always, is some sort of gloves. This stuff is really sticky and you get it all over your hands. It can just really be hard to get off. So it's always a good idea to wear some gloves. We're gonna have to be walking in the epoxy pretty much the entire time. So some pair of spike shoes, I really love these ones here from Shoe In, but any kind of actual spike shoes, even if it's the buckle-on style, that'll work just fine. As far as spreading the epoxy around. These squeegees here from Midwest Rake just work awesome for that. They've got quite a few different mill options as far as how thick we'll put it down. For this system, we like this 8 to 12 mil. I also love these. They make them in 2 different sizes, so we can have a larger one for a job like this. If you need to get around back, behind some stuff, these small ones are good. Obviously, some sort of a handle to put that stuff on is always required. And then we are going to need to back roll this epoxy before we actually cast chips into it. So I like this micro plush, 5/16 micro plush from Worcester Brush, and so we're going to be using these both in 18, and then we have a 9 for our edges. Obviously, we're going to need a different roller frame for the 18s, so this guy here is made that it'll accept those larger rollers. Normal 9-inch roller, and then just a couple just cheap chip brushes just to get along the edges. We don't need anything expensive. The epoxy is going to level out, but we just need something that we can get up along the walls. And then the last thing is just a simple 3-gallon bucket. These work really nice for casting our chips. Trying to put those in a 5-gallon bucket is just, they get a little bit heavy and they're hard to get to the bottom, so I just like these nice 3-gallon buckets here to fill up. And other than that, I think we're ready to get to mixing. And the first thing is the actual tool itself, and we see people making the mistake of using a small little mixture like this that's really only made for 1 gallon, and it's just not big enough. I don't care what kind of drill you have, there's just not enough volume here to actually spin a 3-gallon kit. So we're going to be using one of these. This is actually made for 5 gallons, but that's going to work great for this 3-gallon kit of epoxy. The beauty of this system is that we're making this whole kit, and we don't need any additional containers at this point. All we're going to do is we have our tint pack. We're just going to open this up. We're going to dump it right into our bucket of A, give that a mix just to get things going, and then we're going to open up our B and mix the entire thing right in this factory pail. And again, the beauty is we don't need to measure anything. We don't need any additional buckets or anything like that. Now, this here particular floor is about 600 square feet. And we normally, with the squeegee we're using, we're going to get somewhere in that 150 square foot range out of this epoxy. Now, I also know that this floor, just having a lot of ups and downs, and we're not going to get as good of coverage. As the floor is nice and flat, we can figure that a lot closer. So, we're figuring on probably using all 6 gallons of this, even though that's going to get us down to more like the 100 square foot range. And so the process is going to be, after I dump that B in, I'm going to stick my mixer down in there, and I'm going to go ahead and spin it. I don't want to go full speed, but I do want to create a little bit of a vortex. Mixing it too slow can actually lead to soft spots. And my process has always been, again, it's going to be a total of 3 minutes, but my process has always been to go for 1.5 minutes with the drill, and then I'm going to take my paint stick and I'm going to scrape all the edges. After I've done that, then I'll go ahead and do an additional 1.5 minutes. So total of 3 minutes, stopping halfway in between to scrape with the paint stick.
So I'm going to start out by dumping this epoxy right on the floor, and then I can spread it around with my squeegee. Now the best thing to do is to dump out the entire kit. This epoxy has a pot life of about 20 to 30 minutes. Once I get it all out of the bucket and onto the floor, I'll have plenty of time to work with it. After I have it all spread out, all I need to do is back roll everything to even it all out. I like to give the epoxy about 15 minutes or so to level out before I start throwing the chips, which is perfect for an area this size because it's not going to take me much longer than to put this whole area down. There are a few different methods of throwing the chips, and there's really no right or wrong here, but the important thing is that you get them up in the air so they can fall down like snow, and I would avoid throwing in a downward motion. The idea is to cast the chips until you can't even see the epoxy anymore.
Well, that's pretty much it for today. We got all our epoxy down, all our chips are done, and now we just need to let this stuff dry to the point where we can actually scrape it and do our top coat. So with this particular epoxy, that's usually between 8 to 14 hours, just depending on temperature. It's nice and warm down here, so we're just gonna go ahead and show up in the morning and everything is gonna be ready to go. So we will see you guys then, and we'll get to the last stage of the project. All right, so we're back here the next morning, and our epoxy is all set up and ready to go, ready to get to the next step. And so, when you first get there the next morning, the best thing to do is just go to wherever you ended up at. Just take your hands and just brush off some excess chips. But then I just take my thumb and I'm gonna push down on those chips, and I'm gonna put quite a bit of pressure on that, and I'm gonna try to twist my thumb. And again, right there, I can feel that's nice and solid. There's no chips twisting under my thumb. So now that this is all good to go, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab a floor scraper and we're gonna start scraping these excess chips, because again, we chipped it really heavy and now we need to get these really honed down nice so we can get a nice top coat on here. And then once we get that done and we're done scraping and shaving, well, now all we're gonna do is we're just gonna take a vacuum and we're gonna thoroughly vacuum everything back up, try to get all those loose chips, back up before we start top coating. And so you can see that this is good to go. We got it all honed down and now we are ready to top coat. So to go over a few things that we're gonna need today, the product we're gonna be using for this top coat is gonna be rock hard urethane. And I love it for this kind of situation for a few different reasons. First of all, it's incredibly low odor. Again, we're in this homeowner's basement and the last thing we want to do is stink them out of the house. And so this stuff is incredibly low odor. In fact, it's almost zero odor. As far as some tools we're gonna need, we're still gonna need our spike shoes. Again, just like yesterday, we're gonna have to be walking in at least the guy back rolling is gonna have to be walking in the urethane, so we're gonna need those. A little bit different squeegee today. This is still a speed squeegee from Midwest Rake, although this one is their flat flexible. We're gonna go ahead and use the same gloves, same rollers as yesterday, a few chip brushes for the edges, handle for our rollers, and that's pretty much it. We're gonna go ahead and get started.
The first thing I like to do once I have some on the floor is work in the edges and get the roller thoroughly saturated so it doesn't pull off too much urethane on that first pass of the back roll. After that, I can start pulling it with a flat squeegee and a second person can start rolling.
Well guys, that's pretty much it for today's project. The top coat is all cured out and this floor is now ready to use. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments right below. And for a schedule of our in-depth live training classes, please visit deco-cretesupply.com and click on the training page. So, from all of us here at Deco-Crete TV, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.